Welcome back to PyX Data Break. The topic of today is, what does data tell us about the mega sales arranged by the leading auction houses? My name is Matteo Pace and I'm part of the research team at PyX. For today's exciting topic, I'm delighted to be joined by Christine Bouron, who's founder and CEO of PyX and board member of PyM. Christine's involvement in the art market started 20 years ago. In 2014, Christine founded PyX in London with the goal to bring innovative financial and analytical tools to the fine art market. Then, I'd like to welcome Paolo Turati, who's professor and economist based in Turin, Italy, with many years of senior experience in the art and financial world. Paolo acted as an advisor to the board of various listed companies while organizing and writing about major contemporary art exhibitions for leading European museums. Paolo coordinates the art operations and events for Fidarti's family office and is in charge of the executive wealth management course at Turin University in Italy. So, let's jump to the question of the day. Christine, please.
Over the past few weeks, auction houses have organized many different auctions. And most of these auctions are the so-called mega sales. When looking at the different types of public auctions arranged, it's pretty evident that there are different types of auctions. One are the repeating auctions. These usually are scheduled on a fixed repeating time. They are held as part of a particular series, and they generate huge share of revenue, especially the so-called mega sale. And then on the other end, you've got the other auctions, which do not repeat. They usually are individual sales, and they are much less predictable in terms of revenue generation. So if we look at the revenue that has been generated by the top three leading auction houses month by month since 2017, we can see that again and again in May and then in November, there are huge spikes in revenue. In 2017, in 2018, and in 2019. And this revenue correspond exactly to the time when these repeating mega sales take place in May and November. So what are these repeating mega sales? Well, let's take a calendar over the second quarter from April to June. And we can see here that year after year, systematically, we have the New York mega sale in May. We have the London sales in June. Over April and May, we've got the Hong Kong spring sales. And then in May, in Geneva, we've got the accessory sales, usually watches and jewelries. And when looking at the historical revenue generated from 2007 to 2019, it's pretty evident that these sales, these four different types of sales, generate the largest share of revenue for the auction houses. I mean, almost 80% in 2019. So what happened in 2020? You know, as you may remember, confinement was very much in place. So the Geneva sale in May could not take place. Neither the Hong Kong sale, nor the London sale, nor the New York mega sales. Only at the end of the month of June could Sotheby's held its New York mega sales. And they also had the Geneva accessory sales at the end of June. But neither Christie's nor Phillips could have any of these sales. And the results was a dramatically lower revenue for the auction houses during the second quarter 2020. So obviously, we can see that the postponing of the major repeating spring sale really affected the second quarter 2020. Interestingly, during that time, Sotheby's tried to hold some of its New York mega sale auction, and in particular, the contemporary art day sale. And so it created online, obviously, because the live sale could not take place. And the results were impressive because the sale generated 13.7 million. And when put on a graph, comparing on the x-axis the number of lots and on the y-axis the revenue generated by that auction, we can see that this online sale was the largest ever revenue generated by an online sale. But if we compare it to the traditional live sale arranged for that sale, the contemporary art day sale, we can see that it was dramatically lower because usually the revenue is more in the $100 million. Same thing for the impressionist sale that Sotheby's arranged during the confinement in May. The online sale generated 9.9 million, which again was one of the largest revenue for an online sale, but again, was much lower than the traditional revenue generated by the live mega sale in New York. So what ended up happening with the postponed sale that could not take place during the second quarter? Well, as mentioned before, Sotheby's was able to arrange the sale at the end of June, but then Christie's and Phillips, and also Sotheby's for the Hong Kong sale, placed all their sales during the months of July. So that led to a very busy calendar. And interestingly, the month of July, which is usually a month during which there are no repeating sales, ended up having a very unusual revenue, because we can see that this year we had all the unusual revenue from the repeating mega sales from Hong Kong, London, New York, and Geneva. If we take a bigger picture, looking at the revenue over the past 4 months, from April to July, we can here see clearly that the absence of mega sale in May led to very small revenue. And then we can see in June and July, the mega sale, the impact of the mega sale over the revenue, and how it helped increase the revenue over these past 2 months. So eventually, when we go back to our first graph and look at what happened in 2020 and compare it to the years before, we can see that, again, as initially said, in May and November, we have these huge spikes in revenue. But in May 2020, this year, there were no spikes in revenue because the mega sale could not take place. And as these sales were shifted to June and July, then that's what allowed the revenue to increase again. So more than ever in 2020, I think we can say that the crucial role of the repeating mega sale has been proven as really key revenue generator for Christie's, Sotheby's, and Phillips.
Christine, thank you very much for your insightful comment. Paolo, what is your analysis on the topic?
Well, we can surely say that the important turnovers in auction houses have always obtained it in the so-called mega sales, as Christine told us. The auction houses, again, has had endeavored to hold hybrid mega sales as soon as they have been able to exit out the lockdown, in order to resist an art market price due to the pandemic, but not only. I think that the difference compared with the serious crisis of 12 years ago, when they held it, is that the average prices are resistant, which shows that there is still a lot of liquidity ready to be diverted to quality works and of the world art market. The current drop in turnover, in fact, suffers for a situation of contraction in business that has already become evident in the recent past, mainly due to a significant misalignment between supply and demand, between bid and offer, which often obliges auction houses to take risk on their own or take advantage of third parties who do so in order to issue guarantees on lots entered in the catalog in order to induce sellers to entrust them with the sale of important works of art. In a context in which almost no location is spared from the pandemic restriction, I think that a factor that has contributed to keeping the situation heavy is linked to the fact that despite the high percentage of lots sold recently, there have been few masterpieces put up for the June-July Mega Hybrid Auction 2020. And as you know, it's the top lots that generate turnover.
Well, Paolo, thank you very much for sharing your view on the subject. And now I would like to summarize the two main takeouts that emerge from the presentations of our great speakers. Number one is that repeating sales function as the backbone of the auction market. They are so important that slight changes in their schedule severely affect the whole market, as we've seen in Christine's presentation. And then, so far, it doesn't look like the auction house found a successful format to move mega sales online, repeating the same success that they have with live sales. So, Christine, Paolo, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge. Dear viewers, I look forward to seeing you soon on PIEX Data Breaks.